The vast emptiness of space stretched endlessly before Captain Reed's survey fleet. Their massive ships, gleaming with the latest advancements in alien technology, moved gracefully through the star-filled void. Reed stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Star Seeker, his tall frame and silvery skin reflecting the soft blue light from the ship's displays. "Captain, we're detecting something unusual in Sector 7. Announced First Officer Mills, her antenna twitching with excitement. "It appears to be an artificial structure." Reed moved to the holographic display, his four eyes narrowing as he studied the readings. "Bring us closer." Full scan. As the fleet approached, the object became clearer. Floating silently in space was a ship, but unlike anything they had seen before. Its hull was dark and scarred, bearing the marks of ancient battles. The vessel was roughly cylindrical, with what appeared to be primitive chemical thrust engines at its rear. It's a human ship," Tom said, the young engineer's voice filled with wonder. Unlike his colleagues, who preferred the sterile environment of their advanced ships, Tom had always been fascinated by the engineering methods of other species. "Look at those markings. U.S. Thunderchild." Reed let out a dismissive laugh. "A relic from their early space age. Probably been drifting out here for centuries." He walked around the hologram, studying the ancient vessel with amusement. "Look at that primitive armor plating. And those weapon mounts. They actually used physical projectiles." The bridge crew joined in their captain's laughter, but Tom moved closer to the display, his eyes wide with interest. "Captain, permission to scan the interior." "Granted," Reed said, waving a hand dismissively. "Though I doubt you'll find anything worth studying. These humans, they were so proud of their first steps into space. Now look at it, just another piece of space junk." Tom's fingers flew over the control panel as he initiated deep scans of the Thunderchild. The results made his antenna stand straight up. "Captain, you should see this. The internal structure. It's unlike anything I've ever seen in human historical records." "Probably just decay and damage," Reed replied, but he moved to look at Tom's readings. "What's so interesting about it?" "The power core," Tom explained, pointing to the scan results. "It's cold now, but these readings suggest it was designed to handle far more energy than any human ship of that era should have been capable of producing. And look at these conduits running through the hull. Their purpose isn't clear from our scans." Reed studied the data for a moment before shrugging. Human engineering was always inefficient. They probably overbuilt everything because they didn't know any better. He turned to his communications officer. "Contact Central Command. Tell them we found an interesting museum piece. We'll tow it back to the station for study." As the fleet prepared their tractor beams, Tom couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something important. He watched as the massive energy projectors locked onto the Thunderchild's hull, noting how the ancient armor plates seemed to absorb the energy in an unusual way. "Such a waste of resources," Reed commented as the tow began. "All that metal and primitive circuitry. Our ships achieved the same results with a quarter of the materials." The fleet slowly turned, the Thunderchild now secured between their ships. As they started their journey back to the station, Tom requested permission to continue studying the scan data. Reed granted it with an amused smile, wondering why the young engineer was so fascinated by such outdated technology. What none of them noticed was the brief, almost imperceptible flicker of light deep within the Thunderchild's hull. In a sealed compartment, untouched by centuries of drift, a small display blinked once, logging the energy signature of the alien tractor beams. The ship's systems, though appearing dead to outside scans, had never truly been dormant. They had simply been waiting, gathering data, watching. The Thunderchild allowed itself to be towed, its secret heart beating with patient purpose, while its captors congratulated themselves on their superior technology. They would learn, in time, why humans had survived and thrived among the stars. But for now, the ancient warship kept its silence, playing the role of derelict with practiced perfection. The space station hung like a gleaming jewel against the backdrop of stars. Its spiral arms rotated slowly, creating artificial gravity for the thousands of beings who called it home. In one of these arms, the Thunderchild rested in a massive display hangar, surrounded by curious onlookers. Captain Reed stood proudly before the ancient ship, gesturing to it as he addressed a group of station officials. As you can see, it's a perfect example of early human space travel. Primitive, but interesting from a historical perspective. The station's alert system suddenly chimed, interrupting his presentation. Unscheduled arrival at the outer markers, announced the station eye. A human diplomatic vessel requests immediate docking clearance. Reed's antenna twitched with annoyance. Rather bold of them to arrive unannounced. Grant them permission, but have security teams standing by. The human ship that arrived was everything the Thunderchild wasn't: sleek, modern, and quietly powerful. It docked with practiced ease, and from it emerged a small delegation led by Ambassador James Walker. He was a tall man with gray hair and sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. "Welcome to Station Delta," Reed said, trying to hide his irritation. "Though we usually appreciate advance notice of diplomatic visits." Walker smiled politely. "My apologies for the sudden arrival, Captain Reed. However, when we received word of your discovery, we felt immediate action was necessary." His eyes moved past Reed to fix on the Thunderchild, and something flickered across his face. Recognition, perhaps, or concern. "Ah yes, your ancient warship," Reed said, leading the way to the display hangar. "We're honored to have found such an interesting piece of human history." The ambassador's team followed, their faces carefully neutral. When they entered the hangar, Walker stopped dead in his tracks. "U.S. Thunderchild," he whispered, reading the faded name on the hull. "I never thought I'd see her again." "You know this vessel?" Tom asked eagerly. The young engineer had barely left the hangar since the ship's arrival. "Every human knows the Thunderchild," Walker replied, his voice carrying a weight that made several aliens turn to look at him. "She was one of our first deep space warships. Disappeared during the early expansion, or so our records say." Reed laughed softly. "Well, mystery solved then. A lost relic, found at last. Though I must say, Ambassador, your early technology was rather basic. Look at these crude weapon mounts, the thickness of the hull, so inefficient." Walker walked slowly around the ship, his hand occasionally reaching out to touch the scared armor plates. "May I ask what your scans revealed?" "Nothing surprising," Reed replied. "Dead power core, primitive computer systems, basic chemical weapons. Though Yum Ton here seems to think there's more to it." He gestured to the engineer, who had been following Walker with obvious curiosity. "There are anomalies in the readings," Tom explained eagerly. "Energy patterns that don't match known human technology of that era. And the hull composition is exactly what you'd expect from a ship of that period," Walker interrupted smoothly. "Though I would very much like to inspect the interior. For historical documentation, of course." Reed waved his hand dismissively. "By all means. Though I don't see what you expect to find. We've already conducted thorough scans." Walker turned to his team and spoke quietly. One of them handed him what looked like an old-fashioned metal key. "Standard historical preservation protocols," he explained to Reed's questioning look. "We like to maintain our artifacts properly." As Walker approached the ship's main airlock, Tom noticed something odd. The ambassador's hand, when he reached for the access panel, was perfectly steady, but a small bead of sweat had appeared on his forehead. And just before he touched the panel, Tom could have sworn he heard the ambassador whisper something that sounded like, "Let's hope you still remember me, old friend." The airlock, which had resisted all their attempts to open it, clicked and began to cycle as soon as Walker touched it. Reed blinked in surprise. "Interesting security system for such an old ship," he said. "Yes," Walker replied, his voice carefully neutral. "Interesting indeed." The inside of the Thunderchild was dark and quiet. Ambassador Walker's footsteps echoed through the empty corridors as he led his small team deeper into the ship. Behind them, Tom followed eagerly, while Captain Reed walked with obvious boredom. "These lighting systems are so primitive," Reed commented as they used portable lights to navigate. "Even the emergency systems have failed." Walker touched a wall panel, his fingers moving in what seemed like a random pattern. "Have they?" he asked quietly. Suddenly, soft blue lights flickered to life along the corridors. "Impossible," Reed said, his antenna straightening in surprise. "Our scans showed no power in these systems." "Maybe your scans didn't know where to look," Walker replied, continuing down the corridor. He moved with purpose now, as if he knew exactly where he was going. They reached what appeared to be the bridge. Dust covered the old-style control panels and chairs. Everything looked exactly as one would expect from a centuries-old abandoned ship. Tom watched as Walker walked straight to the captain's chair and pressed his hand against its arm. A soft hum filled the air. Hidden scanners swept over Walker's hand, and a small panel slid open beneath his palm. Inside was what looked like an ancient data chip. "Fascinating," Tom said, moving closer. "Is that some kind of historical record?" Walker carefully removed the chip. "Something like that." He pulled out a small device from his pocket and inserted the chip. Holographic text appeared in the air, but in a code Tom had never seen before. "Project Trojan," Walker read aloud, his eyes moving quickly over the text. "Just as I suspected." "Project what?" Reed asked, trying to read the strange symbols. "Tell me, Captain," Walker said, turning to face Reed. "Have you ever heard of the Trojan horse?" Reed's antenna twitched. "Some human mythology, isn't it? Hardly relevant, though." "It's a story about deception," Walker interrupted. "About making your enemy believe they found something harmless, when in fact—" He paused, looking around the bridge. "Well, let's just say appearances can be deceiving." Tom's eyes widened as understanding began to dawn. "The power readings I found, the strange hull composition. This isn't really an ancient ship, is it?" Walker smiled. "Oh, it's old enough, but not quite as old as it wants you to think." He pressed another hidden panel, and suddenly the dusty bridge transformed. Holographic displays sprang to life, showing systems far more advanced than anything that should have existed in a ship of this era. "Impossible," Reed exclaimed, stepping back. "Our scans showed nothing like this." "That's rather the point, Captain," Walker said calmly. "The Thunderchild was built to be overlooked, to be dismissed as outdated, primitive, harmless." He gestured to the now active displays. "Everything you scanned was designed to be scanned. Every primitive system you found was meant to be found." Tom moved from display to display, his scientific curiosity overwhelming his shock. "The hull, it's not just armor, is it? It's a metamaterial disguise system." "Among other things," Walker agreed. "The Thunderchild is what we call a wolf in sheep's clothing. A warship disguised as a relic." Reed's face had turned pale. "A warship? But why? Why go to such lengths to hide its true nature?" Walker's expression grew serious. "Because, Captain, sometimes the best place to hide a guardian is in plain sight. The Thunderchild was never lost. She was stationed out there deliberately, watching, waiting." "Waiting for what?" Tom asked, both frightened and fascinated. Before Walker could answer, the station's alert system blared to life. A voice filled the ship's bridge. "Unknown vessels detected at the outer marker. They're not responding to hails. Multiple ships moving into attack formation." Walker looked at the others, his face grim. "Waiting for that." The space station's alarms filled every corridor with their urgent wailing. On the Thunderchild's bridge, Captain Reed's communicator buzzed with emergency messages. "This is impossible," Reed said, his antenna vibrating with stress. "Our defense systems are the best in the sector. No hostile force would dare." His voice trailed off as the main screens showed the approaching enemy fleet. Dozens of black ships, their hulls covered in strange patterns that seemed to hurt the eyes. Station control to all personnel, the AI's voice announced. Multiple hostile vessels detected. Raising primary shields. All civilians please move to designated shelter areas. Tom worked quickly at one of the newly activated console stations. Captain, these ships, their energy signatures don't match anything in our database. The station shuddered. Outside, bright beams of energy sliced through space, hammering against the station's shields. The protective barrier flickered with each hit, its usual steady blue glow turning unstable. Report. Reed barked into his communicator. Sir, shield strength dropping, came the panicked response. Their weapons, they're using some kind of phase-shifted energy we've never seen before. Our defenses aren't calibrated for this. Another blast rocked the station. This time, several power conduits exploded in the distance, sending cascades of sparks through the observation windows. Shields at 40% and falling. The station AI announced calmly. Evacuation protocols initiated. All non-essential personnel to emergency vessels. Ambassador Walker stood quietly through all of this, watching the enemy ships with narrow eyes. As I thought, he said softly. They finally found us. You know who they are? Tom asked, looking up from his console. An old enemy. One we've been watching for. Walker turned to Reed. Captain, your station's defenses won't hold against their weapons. They're using technology specifically designed to bypass standard shield configurations. Reed's face showed a mix of anger and fear. Then what do you suggest, Ambassador? We have thousands of civilians on this station. Shield failure imminent, the AI announced. 20%. 19. 18. Walker straightened his uniform. Captain Reed, I hereby request emergency activation clearance for the U.S. Thunderchild. What? Reed stared at him. This old ship. What could it possibly? Another blast hit the station. This time, the lights flickered and gravity wavered for a moment. Through the windows, they could see escape pods beginning to launch from the lower levels. That wasn't a request, Captain, Walker said, his voice hard. That was a courtesy notification. Tom, you might want to stay. We could use someone with your technical understanding. Tom nodded eagerly, despite his fear. Reed looked between them, then at the screen showing his station under attack. His antenna drooped in resignation. Do what you must, Ambassador, he said quietly. I need to coordinate the evacuation. As Reed hurried from the bridge, Walker moved to the captain's chair. His hands flew over the controls, entering complex sequences of commands. The bridge hummed with increasing power. Station shields at 12%, the AI warned. Hull breaches detected in sections 7 through 12. Medical teams responding. Tom, Walker called out, route emergency power from the station to the Thunderchild's dock clamps. We need to break free before the main systems engage. The young alien engineer worked quickly, his fingers dancing across the now active control panels. Power diverted. But sir, even if this ship is more advanced than it appears, how can one vessel stand against an entire fleet? Walker smiled grimly as he initiated the final activation sequence. Who said anything about one vessel? His hand hovered over a large red control. Time to show them what humanity's primitive technology can really do. The Thunderchild's systems surged to life. Deep within the ship, machinery that had waited patiently for centuries began to move. The dull, scarred hull plates started to shift and change, like a sleeping giant finally waking up. All hands, Walker announced, though there were only 2 of them on the bridge, battle stations. The Thunderchild's bridge hummed with growing power as Walker's fingers flew across the control panels. Emergency lights flashed through the station's windows, casting alternating shadows across his determined face. Ship systems at 40% and rising, Tom announced from his station, his antenna twitching with excitement and fear. But sir, the dock clamps. Watch, Walker said calmly. He pressed a sequence of buttons, and suddenly the primitive hull plates around the clamps began to move. The metal itself seemed to flow like liquid, slipping free of the station's grip. Through the bridge windows, they could see crowds of aliens gathering in the observation deck, pointing at the Thunderchild in amazement. The once dull hull was coming alive, patterns of light racing across its surface like digital rivers. Main computer online, a new voice announced, the ship's AI, speaking for the first time in centuries. Its voice was deep and confident, nothing like the standard mechanical tones of modern AIs. "Welcome back, Ambassador Walker. It's been a while." Walker smiled. "Too long, old friend. Status report. All systems responding. Hull transformation at 30%. Weapons charging. Shield generators spinning up." The AI paused. "I detect 16 hostile vessels. Their energy signatures match known Darkweaver configurations." Tom looked up from his console in surprise. Darkweavers? But they're just stories. Space pirates from the outer rings. "Not stories," Walker said grimly. "They're very real. The Thunderchild was built to fight them, among other things. Speaking of which," he pulled a small device from his pocket and inserted it into the captain's console. "Authorization code. Phoenix Rising." The ship's transformation accelerated. The seemingly crude armor plates split apart, revealing layers of advanced technology beneath. Weapon ports appeared where there had been only scared metal. The rear engines, which had looked like simple chemical thrusters, reconstructed themselves into something far more sophisticated. "Hull transformation at 60%, the AI reported. "Internal systems online. Quantum core powering up." Another blast rocked the station. Through the windows, they could see the station's shields flickering, nearly gone. Escape pods were still launching, streaming away from the threatened habitat. "Time to show them what we can really do," Walker said. He pressed his hand against a glowing panel, and the entire bridge began to change. The dusty, ancient-looking controls melted away, replaced by sleek, holographic interfaces. The ceiling became transparent, giving them a clear view of space above. Tom stared in wonder. It's beautiful," he whispered. "Transformation at 90%, the AI announced. Weapons hot. Shield generators ready. Awaiting your command, Ambassador." Walker stood from the captain's chair, which had transformed into a more modern command center. "Tom, I need you on engineering. Your understanding of current technology might help us interface with the station's systems." The young engineer nodded eagerly, moving to his station. The controls adapted under his hands, becoming a hybrid of human and alien design that he somehow instinctively understood. "Final transformation sequence initiating," the AI declared. The last traces of the ancient warship vanished. In its place floated a vessel that looked both human and somehow more than human. Its hull gleamed with a dark, metallic sheen that seemed to absorb light. Lines of energy pulsed along its length, and weapon ports glowed with barely contained power. On the observation deck, the watching aliens stepped back in shock. Captain Reed, who had returned to witness the transformation, stood speechless. The primitive relic had become something that made even the station's most advanced ships look outdated. "The Darkweavers are launching another attack run," the AI reported calmly. "Their weapons are targeting the station's remaining shields." Walker's face hardened. Not this time. He sat back in the command chair, hands hovering over the controls. "All power to forward shields. Bring us about. It's time to show them why humanity survived the early wars." The Thunderchild's engines flared to life, no longer hiding their true power. The ship moved with impossible grace, positioning itself between the station and the approaching enemy fleet. "Weapons locked," the AI announced. "Ready to engage." The Darkweaver fleet hung against the starfield like a collection of black daggers, their strange hulls seeming to bend the light around them. Energy weapons charged along their sides, preparing for another attack run on the station. Inside the Thunderchild's transformed bridge, Walker watched the enemy ships with calm focus. "Status report," he ordered. Enemy vessels spreading out into attack formation. The ship's AI responded. Their weapons are charged. They seem confused by our transformation. Through the bridge's transparent ceiling, they could see the Darkweaver ships hesitating, their attack pattern becoming irregular. Clearly, the sight of their helpless target transforming into an advanced warship had disrupted their plans. "Let's use that confusion," Walker said. "Tactical, target their lead ship. Show them what primitive technology can do." The Thunderchild's weapons powered up. What had appeared to be simple projectile launchers now glowed with contained plasma energy. Along the hull, points of light gathered as the ship's true arsenal revealed itself. "Target locked," the AI announced. "First volley ready." Walker leaned forward in his command chair. "Fire." The Thunderchild's first shot wasn't the crude missile or simple energy beam the Darkweavers might have expected. Instead, a burst of quantum-guided plasma erupted from the ship's bow, twisting through space in ways that seemed to ignore normal physics. The lead Darkweaver ship tried to evade, but the plasma followed its movement, striking its shields with devastating effect. "Direct hit," Tom reported from his engineering station, his antenna straight with excitement. "Their shield technology, it's not designed to handle this kind of attack." The enemy fleet scattered, breaking their formation. Two ships moved to protect their damaged leader, while others began firing back at the Thunderchild. Their energy weapons, so effective against the station's shields, splashed harmlessly against the warship's defensive field. "Their weapons can't penetrate our shield matrix," the AI reported with what sounded almost like satisfaction. "The metamaterial hull is dispersing their energy attacks." Walker nodded. "Time to show them what else we can do. Combat pattern Delta. Let's remind them why humanity survived the early space age." The Thunderchild moved with impossible grace for a ship its size. Its engines, no longer pretending to be simple chemical thrusters, propelled it through complex maneuvers that left afterimages in the Watcher's eyes. Each turn brought new weapons to bear on the enemy fleet. 3 targets locked, the AI announced. "Firing solutions ready." "Execute," Walker commanded. This time, multiple weapons fired at once. Plasma bolts, quantum torpedoes, and beam weapons that seemed to phase in and out of normal space. The Thunderchild's arsenal was beyond anything the watching aliens had seen before. 3 more Darkweaver ships took direct hits, their advanced shields failing against weapons they weren't designed to stop. "The enemy fleet is breaking up," Tom reported. They're retreating." But one ship, larger than the others, turned to face the Thunderchild directly. Its hull rippled with dark energy as it charged what appeared to be its main weapon. "Their flagship is preparing to fire," the AI warned. "Energy readings are off the scale." Walker's expression remained calm. "Divert auxiliary power to forward shields. Prepare the main gun." The front of the Thunderchild began to change again. Plates shifted, revealing a massive weapon port that none of the earlier scans had detected. Energy coursed through the ship as power was channeled into this final surprise. "What is that?" Tom asked in awe. "Something we hoped we'd never need to use," Walker replied. "The Thunderchild wasn't just built to fight. It was built to win." The enemy flagship fired, sending a beam of dark energy toward them that seemed to consume the light around it. At the same moment, the Thunderchild's main weapon discharged. The two forces met in space between the ships. For a moment, everything seemed to stop. Then the Thunderchild's blast tore through the enemy beam like it wasn't there, striking the Darkweaver flagship dead center. The black ship's hull cracked, energy pouring from the wound. "Target neutralized," the AI reported as the flagship's lights flickered and died. "Remaining enemy vessels are jumping to faster than light. They're running." Tom looked at the tactical display in amazement. In less than 10 minutes, the Thunderchild had done what an entire station's worth of advanced ships couldn't. Driven off the Darkweaver fleet, the space around the station slowly returned to normal. Emergency teams worked to repair the damage from the attack, while civilian ships that had fled now carefully made their way back. The Thunderchild floated protectively near the station, its transformed hull gleaming in the starlight. On the observation deck, Captain Reed stood with his senior staff, watching the human warship through the reinforced windows. His antenna drooped slightly with the shame of his earlier mockery. "I don't understand," he said quietly as Walker approached. "Why maintain such an elaborate deception? Why hide your true capabilities?" Walker stood beside him, hands clasped behind his back. "Sometimes, Captain, the best shield is being underestimated. The Darkweavers have been hunting for our advanced ships for years, but an old, forgotten relic." He smiled. "They never gave it a second thought." Tom hurried onto the deck, his face bright with excitement. "Ambassador, the repair crews report the station's shields are back to 60%. The Thunderchild's AI is helping us modify them to resist the Darkweaver weapons." "Of course it is," Walker said. "That's part of why we're here. The Thunderchild isn't just a warship. It's a guardian, a teacher, and a bridge between our peoples." Reed turned to face Walker fully. "How many more ships like this do you have hidden throughout space?" "That would be telling, wouldn't it?" Walker's eyes twinkled. "Let's just say the Thunderchild isn't alone in its watch." The station's main viewing screen activated, showing the Thunderchild's true form in detail. Its hull, no longer pretending to be ancient and damaged, displayed an intricate pattern of advanced technology. Weapon ports that had seemed primitive now clearly housed sophisticated energy weapons. Even the ship's name, once faded and worn, now shone in bright, proud letters. "The design is incredible," Tom said, studying the displayed schematics. "The way it uses metamaterials to hide its true nature, the adaptive systems, the AI integration. We could learn so much from this." Walker nodded. "That's the idea. The Thunderchild was built during humanity's early expansion, yes, but not as the primitive vessel we pretended it to be. It was built as a proof of what cooperation between species could achieve." He touched a control panel, and the display changed to show interior schematics. Some of these systems were developed by human engineers. Others came from trading knowledge with alien allies. A few were created by combining ideas from multiple species in ways nobody had tried before. Reed's antenna twitched thoughtfully. "And now you're offering to share this knowledge with us?" "Within reason," Walker replied. "The Darkweavers aren't the only threat out there. Humanity learned long ago that we're stronger together than apart. Every species has something to teach, something to offer." The station's AI interrupted with an announcement. "Repair teams report all critical systems are stabilized. Station defenses are now operating at 70% capacity." Reed looked at the Thunderchild again, seeing it with new eyes. "I owe you an apology, Ambassador. We were so quick to judge, so certain of our own superiority." "No apology needed, Captain," Walker said warmly. "We've all made similar mistakes. What matters is learning from them." Tom, who had been studying the ship's schematics, suddenly looked up. "Sir, these designs, they're meant to be modified, aren't they? The whole system is adaptable, meant to incorporate new technologies as they're developed." Walker smiled broadly. "Very good, Tom. The Thunderchild was never meant to be a static weapon. It's a framework, a foundation for growing and learning. Just as humanity never stopped at our primitive beginnings, this ship never stops evolving." The ship's AI spoke through the station speakers. "New contact detected at long range. Analyzing. Confirmed friendly. Another human diplomatic vessel approaches." "Right on schedule," Walker said. "Now the real work begins. Captain Reed, with your permission, I'd like to establish a permanent human presence on your station. There's much we could teach each other." Reed looked at the Thunderchild, then at his damaged but surviving station, and finally at the young engineer Tom, whose eyes were bright with the promise of new knowledge. "Permission granted, Ambassador," he said. "I believe we all have much to learn."